Like, if I'm driving by this thing, can I just like pull over and like butcher up this raw cow on the side? Like, if I accidentally hit it, like, could I have kept the meat? I don't know. I'm curious to the roadkill laws in Pennsylvania. Maybe I accidentally swerve out. I don't know. Ooh, that's like 900 pounds worth of steak right there. They should have called me. I would have caught it. Got a good piece of steak out of it, because being vegan is not the way I do things. All right. Greta's next, folks. Stick around. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. Have a good one.
Hurricane Erin is unleashing the sea on the East Coast. Beach closures, evacuations, and flood warnings are now in effect from the Outer Banks up the Atlantic coast all the way to New England. We're going to bring you live to North Carolina, where a state of emergency has now been declared. Also tonight, wait until China sees this one. The White House has an official TikTok account.
Too late. I call him Too Late Pal because he's always too late. Everything's computer.
More from that TikTok account coming up. Plus, we have news about that disgraceful Fulton County jail where even a dead inmate was found infested with maggots. But first, Tulsi Gabbard, the United States Director of National Intelligence, is slashing her agency's workforce. Gabbard posting this statement that reads in part, quote, "Over the last 20 years, ODNI has become bloated and inefficient, and the intelligence community is rife with abuse of power, unauthorized leaks of classified intelligence, and politicized weaponization of intelligence," end quote. The reorganization includes slashing the intelligence office workforce by 40%. Gabbard says this will save taxpayers more than $700 million per year. And that is not all the Director of National Intelligence is up to. Gabbard has also revoked the security clearances of 37 current and former intelligence members. Gabbard says these members, quote, "abused the public trust by politicizing and manipulating intelligence, leaking classified intelligence without authorization, and or committing intentional egregious violations of tradecraft standards," end quote. Former Speaker of the House and former California Congressman Kevin McCarthy joins me. Nice to see you, sir.
Nice to be back.
Boy, she's mowing right through the DNI.
It needs to be done, too. I mean, remember, when I became Speaker, I removed Adam Schiff and Swalwell from the Intel Committee because we knew that Schiff was leaking. You could always see it when he would come in, they'd walk right out, someone would see what was told, and Schiff, sleeping with a Chinese spy, there's got to be other Democrats that could fill that spot instead of him. And Pelosi kept him knowing that.
Well, I've always had a problem with people leaving federal service and keeping their security clearance. I'm like, what's the point of that? Why do they have them?
You know, they shouldn't. Okay, now when members leave, when I left, even though I was part of the Gang of Eight, I lost my clearance. I recently, based upon some activity I'm doing now, had to go back and reapply to get my clearance and go through the system.
Well, that makes sense. If you lose, I mean, it should automatically go away. And if you need it again, it shouldn't just be everyone out the door. You get to keep it with you.
And what you watched how political they used it, especially those Democrats when they were doing the laptop.
51 of them.
Yeah, they should all lose their clearance because they made it all political. They knew what that was, but they were lying to the American people, using this clearance to saying, I know something you don't. And they used it for political basis.
They said that the laptop was, and it was Russian mischief, Russian misinformation, Russian mischief. And the problem with it, to make it most appalling, either they were completely stupid, or they were incompetent, or they were deceitful, because that laptop had been in the possession of the FBI. This was written in late October of 2020. The laptop had been in the FBI possession since the previous December.
Yeah, so they knew that it was true. It was Clapper and the others try to change an election.
How do they get away with this?
They shouldn't be able to get away with it.
Is there a crime that's associated with it?
I think the very basic, they should lose their security clearance because they used it as an authority to tell the American public on a political basis, and that was fundamentally wrong, and they knew it. They never should have gotten involved.
Well, your senator, Senator Schiff, Adam Schiff, who you just remarked about, he got rewarded by the California voters. He was raised from Congress to the Senate.
Very unfortunate. I think one of the mistakes, I tried to move what he had done to the American people by the number of lies to the Ethics Committee. One of our members wanted to move it to censure, which he used to raise money to help him win an election. I thought if you took him to ethics and people literally saw it on a basis, he would come out with a whole different situation.
Well, what I always thought was bad about Schiff is that he'd come up to the microphones and he'd make a statement as the either the chairman of the Intel or
But he
ranking
lied.
member of the Intel. And, you know, how are we to challenge it in the media? Because we're not inside the room at all. There's no way you can challenge. You just have to accept it. And you think, like, why would he lie about that? And when he's actually a former assistant United States attorney, I mean, he has some respect for the law. And it was unbelievable to me.
Well, why would they move impeachment to the Intel committee? It's supposed to be judiciary. Why would the so-called whistleblower come forward when you find out had already met with Schiff, had known and worked through? Everything he would do, what he would leak, was not true. And he used it as the impression, well, I'm the chairman of Intel. I know stuff that you don't know and you can't question me.
Well, he's being investigated right now.
He should be investigated.
Well, for something different.
But what he put the American public through, knowingly lying when he did it, he should be investigated.
Well, what he's been investigated for, and he's going to have an opportunity to respond to it, is claiming 2 homes as his primary residence, one in Potomac, Maryland, and one out in Burbank, California. And he's being investigated for that to see whether or not he apparently on a mortgage application.
You can't live someplace outside of the state that you're elected.
Well, then, well, I don't know. He will have to sort it out with the Trump administration. All right. Let me turn to, as long as we're on talking about California, former Vice President Kamala Harris. Is she going to run, do you think?
No, I don't think she runs. I think when she really thought about running for governor, and she held back a long time before made that decision, I think she realized she couldn't win.
As governor?
As governor.
Really? Who could beat her governor?
I think a lot of people. I think at the time there was probably a chance a Republican could win if she was the nominee for the Democratic Party. And so she backed away. Look, if she could have walked in, being governor of the 4th largest economy in the world, that would be a very powerful position to have. And why wouldn't she run for it? The only way she wouldn't run for it if she couldn't win. And the Democrats want to distance themselves from everything about Biden. Remember, wasn't it just a year ago today she was nominated for president? The hoopla, the celebration, the convention. Now we've got a current governor of California that is the biggest chameleon. You know, if you looked at him four months ago, he had all the conservatives on his podcast, from Bannon to Charlie Kirk, and now today he wants to go extreme the other way to act like he's fighting the president to try to become the nominee.
Is her political career over Kamala Harris?
Look, I've watched other people in California. I've watched a vice president and Richard Nixon run for governor and lose and come back to become president from California. I don't think anything's over. She's at a younger age than where Biden was. I don't think she's got a future, but I never say never.
Gavin Newsom have a future as a presidential candidate on the head of the Democratic ticket?
I don't think he could ever get there when people really, if he had to go for a longer campaign, he couldn't get there because people would see the truth behind him. There's no principle. There's no philosophy. It's just whatever. He's like the TMZ politician. It's whatever's flowing in the wind that day.
So I know you're going to say there is no risk, but just to humor me, who's the biggest risk for the Democratic Party in terms of a strong candidate for president in 2+ years?
The Republican is the risk.
Democrat.
No, the Democrats? Look,
I mean, who's the risk to the Republican Party? Which Democratic candidate?
I think if Democrats come back to the middle, so if you find a Democrat that is a governor that talks like Fetterman but is different, I think they could be competitive. What they need to do is they need to find, who can they find the candidate that actually could go to a Dana White fight match and walk into the crowd, right? It's somebody that's going to be a little more common sense, fiscally conservative, socially conservative, that can get there. But they don't want to campaign for that. They go much more to the socialist wing of the party.
Well, when I was a kid, the Democrats represented the union, had the lunch pails, and the Republicans went to the country clubs.
Exactly. It's vice versa today.
Yeah, how did that
Well, if you look at the protests, right? Here's President Trump, which extraordinary job he has done in such a short amount of time. Who thought? I mean, even if someone had president for 4 years could not have done what this man has done. But here he is stopping crime in D.C. Who's protesting him? The Democrats. But they're all the liberal white individuals. If you go to California, the most liberal people in California are those white Democrats who live along the beach. right? The working class people are really what President Trump has brought to this party, and he's expanded the Republican Party. So that's why I say, what Democrat you have to fear? The individual who wants to go after the Trump voter.
Former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, nice to see you back in town.
Thanks for having
nice
me.
To see you. And you've heard this before, if you can't beat them, join them. Well, that's apparently what the White House is thinking. During President Trump's first term, his administration sought to ban TikTok in the United States, and now the White House has launched a TikTok account. So far, the account has 8 videos and more than 177,000 followers. Here's a sneak peek.
I was the hunted, and now I'm the hunter.
You better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
And I like Canada very much, but we don't want to have Canada making our cars. We want to make our cars. Oh, it's a phone call. Do you mind? Hello? Okay, it's only a congressman.
Too late. I call him Too Late Pal, because he's always too late. Everything's computer. Too late. I call him Too Late. Come on, Too Late. Let's have dinner. Everything good? Everything all right? You want an egg? You remember when the bunny took Joe Biden out? He's not taking Trump out.
You want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
Okay, I admit I'm on TikTok too. Check mine out. Coming up, the United States deploys 3 warships not to the Middle East, but south near the coast of Venezuela. What this means when the record continues. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is vowing to mobilize more than 4.5 million militia members across the country of Venezuela. This is in response to the United States deploying 3 warships to the waters off the coast of Venezuela. Maduro calls the U.S. deployment a, quote, mistake. He also says it's a bizarre threat from a, quote, declining empire. President Trump has activated the destroyers as part of an effort to crack down on Latin American drug cartels. It underscores the administration's wider goal of ending illegal immigration at the southern border. Let's hope it also deters the nonstop, inhumane human trafficking done by cartels in the region. And a road to nowhere. That is how Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov described the meeting among President Trump, President Zelensky, and European leaders. Russia stressed any attempts to resolve security issues without Moscow's participation would not help end the war. Meanwhile, Trump said that the United States may provide air support to back a Ukraine peace deal, but Trump also stated there would be no U.S. boots on the ground. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Wesley Clark joins me. Good evening, sir. And let me go first to Venezuela. It's like nobody's been paying much attention to Venezuela for the last several years, but that's where the drugs are coming up through there, and there's so much human trafficking. The waters are so dangerous. You've got cartels. What is your impression of sending these three warships?
Well, I think they might help. They also provide some assurance to the neighboring country of Guyana, which does not have really any military to protect itself, but does have important offshore oil that Venezuela has eyed as it may take it. So there may be more to this than simply the drug cartels.
I think, it's, yes, the oil, Venezuela has the biggest oil reserve in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, so that's actually quite attractive to the United States. But one of the things I've always been concerned about, and it goes way back to the Natalie Holloway case, is the level of human trafficking that goes on there. It's just breathtaking how many women are trafficked in the region and sent all over the world. And it's one of the things that's pretty much ignored, except that the State Department does have an annual report every year, but it's just an annual report with nothing being done. So these cartels have really gotten away with murder. It's
true. The cartels are there, they're doing things. The question is really how effective will the destroyers with Aegis radars be? These are warships, and they may not be the ideal vessels. They certainly make a statement when they're there. We've seen the cartels smuggle in submarines and vessels that are barely visible to radar on the surface. So it's not just the ships. It requires a whole effort to shut down this, including a lot of airborne surveillance, radar teams, and work on the ground in places like Colombia. We turn to Russia, Ukraine, and the United States.
Do you expect that President Putin will meet in a bilateral just with Ukrainian President Zelensky?
Not anytime soon. I think, President Trump was doing the best he could with the summit in Washington. The European leaders came, but I think what really happened is maybe there was a misunderstanding early on, maybe when Steve Witkoff was in Moscow, that Russia might be willing to make some concessions. There's no indication of any concessions, and Lavrov, who is a very, very prominent spokesman for President Putin, has said that nothing has changed. They don't want any NATO forces or NATO nation forces inside Ukraine. Now, Russia hasn't changed its goals. It's not clear that there's going to be any progress on this right now. On the other hand, it's a good thing to be thinking about security guarantees because this is not something you could just whip up at the last minute. If you're going to do a peace agreement, you got to really do your homework. And so the handshakes at the top are all good if it's real and if it were there. But it takes a lot of staff work to make it real. And that staff work's just now starting on the NATO side. And there hasn't really been any work with the Russians, in part because, I guess, in whole part, because President Putin really doesn't want to stop the war, no matter what he tells President Trump on these phone calls.
Well, President Trump wants the killing to stop. President Zelensky says he wants peace. What is it that would squeeze Putin into wanting peace? What's his weakness or his Achilles heel?
President Trump said that if that summit in Alaska didn't produce a ceasefire, there would be severe consequences. I think he needs some severe consequences. Is it more sanctions? Is it sanctions that are secondary sanctions? Are we going to sanction China for buying Russian oil? They're the biggest customers right now. And are we going to provide more weapons and defensive armaments directly to Ukraine rather than having the Europeans have to go through the process of buying them from the United States? I think all those measures have to be looked at and implemented right away because Mr. Putin is someone who responds to pressure. He may like a handshake and a red carpet treatment, but if you saw President Trump's face when he got out of that limousine or in the press conference, you could see that despite the words, this was not a happy meeting for the United States. Putin is a really hard man to deal with. He's the senior statesman in the world today. He's got lots of experience, and he spent 25 years plotting and scheming and waging war to restore the space of the former Soviet Union. He's not going to be easily stopped.
How well equipped is the Russian military? I mean, how long can they go on?
Russian military is doing quite well, actually, in terms of equipment. Now, you may not always see this in the immediate frontline reports in Ukraine, but China is providing additional equipment to them. They're providing the ability to build a new factory, double the Shahed drone production. The Russian logistics buildup has been underway in Belarus, so that Russia will soon have the option of sending up to 10 new combat divisions that it's forming up with new tanks and new equipment that's not being put on the front lines in Ukraine. It'll have the option of going through Belarus and cutting off Kyiv from the north or going against the Baltic states. And so this doesn't look like a war that's about to end anytime soon. Now, you could say that Putin's going to do this. He's bluffing and he's continuing. He really wants peace, but I hope that's what it is, but there's no indication of it. And what he's gotten instead, as a result of the summit, is a license to continue the striking civilians and going after the ground in Kyiv. If you really want to stop the killing, demand an immediate ceasefire.
I think he also got probably President Trump's got pretty angry if he doesn't get something out of that, but we'll see what happens. General Wesley Clark, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And more gifts for President Donald Trump. On Monday, Ukrainian President Zelensky presented Trump with a golf putter. The golf club was a gift from a Ukrainian soldier, Junior Sergeant Konstantin Kartavtsev. The soldier lost one of his legs while fighting Russian invaders. Along with presenting Trump with the golf putter, Zelensky showed a video message from the Ukrainian soldier to Trump. In the video message, the injured soldier said, quote, "I'm one of the soldiers you've spoken about. They are courageous. They're good soldiers. I lost a leg rescuing my fellow men and recovering here with golf," end quote. The golf putter is engraved with the words, "Let's put peace together." Coming up, President Trump is calling for a member of the Federal Reserve to resign as not Fed Chair Jerome Powell. When the record continues. President Trump is renewing calls for Fed Chair Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. The president posting on Truth Social, quote, "Could somebody please inform Jerome, too late, Powell, that he is hurting the housing industry very badly. People can't get a mortgage because of him. There's no inflation, and every sign is pointing to a major rate cut," end quote. President didn't stop there. He's also calling on Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook to resign. This after Cook was accused of committing mortgage fraud. The head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, William Pult, posting on X, quote, "Lisa D. Cook committed mortgage fraud by designating her out-of-state condo as her primary residence, just 2 weeks after taking a loan on her Michigan home, where she also declared it as her primary residence," end quote. Financial markets economist and president of the Lonsky Group, John Lonsky, joins me. Nice to see you.
Same here.
Do you expect that Ms. Cook will resign? She's been accused, certainly not convicted, but she's got one accuser on her tail.
No, whether or not Trump has the ability to push her out of her current position. But, this raises an interesting possibility because we know right now that we have two dissenters from what Jerome Powell desires, those being Fed Governors Bowman and Governor Waller. In addition, perhaps before the next Fed meeting on September 17th, we get a replacement for the resigning Fed governor. That would be Steve Marrin. So we would have three. And of course, and if we could get Cook out of the way, then 4 of the 7 members of the Board of Governors would basically lean more towards Trump as opposed to Jerome Powell. Interesting, but let's not forget there's still 12 voting members of the FOMC, and those are the people that decide upon monetary policy.
And is the vote a unanimous one or a majority?
Well, you have 12. You have to have a majority, I suppose, to go ahead. And you don't need unanimity to go ahead and change the direction of Fed policy. It's going to be a majority that rules.
Let me turn now to Russia and Ukraine. As we follow very closely here in Washington, actually around the world, whether or not Putin and Zelensky will meet, the question is if they don't meet, what's available to Trump to try to put pressure on Putin. And the one thing is secondary sanctions. If they put secondary sanctions, it's really going to impact big countries that we do a lot of trading with, including India and China. So how painful would it be to the American people with secondary sanctions?
There could be some pain because the intent of secondary sanctions is to stop India and perhaps China from importing crude oil from Russia. And if just say India were forced to buy oil from the rest of the world, that could have the effect of pushing crude oil prices higher, meaning higher energy prices. Right now, the U.S. economy is benefiting from relatively cheap crude. It's well under $70 per barrel, and that's helping to rein in price inflation. That's offsetting the upward pressure being put on prices by tariffs.
Would the secondary sanctions be tailored to particular products, though, or would it be across the board? Because we do an awful lot of trading, for instance, with China. The generic, many pharmaceutical drugs that save lives here in the United States, as we get the components in China.
Well, that's a good question. India is a much better target for the United States because what we import from India is a fraction of what we import from China. It's relatively low. And Trump doesn't want to take any type of action that jeopardizes the performance of the U.S. economy, makes drugs all the more expensive. I think he will try to avoid that to the utmost. Of course, China realizes that. So China might say, well, it's very doubtful that Trump would go so far as to impose across the board secondary sanctions on China. Maybe it would just apply to certain products.
Let's look at gas. Russia is the gas station to Western Europe. if there are secondary sanctions, then all of a sudden Western Europe is without gas, without natural gas. That would then drive prices up on natural gas. Is that something that we can absorb here in the United States?
Well, again, I would think that it's unlikely that Trump would go ahead and impose secondary sanctions that would, say, drive the price of natural gas sharply higher, just as home heating season is approaching. We already have a problem with natural gas utility rates that recently were up by nearly 14% from a year ago. Let's not forget, one of the big headaches American households face today deals with elevated electric and gas utility rates. I don't think that Trump wants to make any type of action that is going to worsen that source of inflationary pressure.
So what's his option?
Well, his option would have to be tailor-made. Secondary sanctions, again, aiming at countries like India, limiting it to certain products, maybe going to China and saying, well, I'm going to impose a 200% tariff on exports of toys from China to the United States. I don't know if that's going to have much of an impact. There's no denying the fact that if secondary sanctions, secondary tariffs are going to work at forcing Russia to come to a peace agreement with Ukraine, unfortunately, those secondary sanctions are going to be felt by the American economy and American consumer.
John Lonsky, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greta.
Jury selection is underway in Florida. A wealthy matriarch is accused of hiring hitmen to kill her former son-in-law. Donna Adelson is charged with first-degree murder of Dan Markle. In 2014, the Florida State University law professor was murdered in his driveway. Adelson has pleaded not guilty. She is, though, the fifth person to be charged in the case. 4 others have already been convicted, including her son, Charlie Adelson, and his ex-girlfriend. Others convicted were the 2 hitmen who carried out the murder. Meanwhile, we all know, or should know, that drinking and driving is against the law. When it comes to drinking and flying, the rules are not so cut and dry. According to the FAA, commercial pilots cannot consume any alcohol within 8 hours of a flight, but some pilots really blur the line, like this pilot from Southwest Airlines. At 6 a.m., minutes before takeoff from South Carolina, someone noticed the pilot reeked of alcohol and alerted police.
When was the last time you had something to drink?
Last night.
About how many hours ago?
Like 10 hours ago, at least.
How many drinks did you have?
A few beers, sir.
Define a few beers.
A few beers.
Would you be willing to define field sobriety with me right now?
No.
Why not?
There's no need.
Well, I can smell an odor consistent with an alcoholic beverage.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
These.
What is that?
Rose.
Do you have any fresh ones that haven't been in your mouth?
Yeah. Right in my bag.
Thank you.
The pilot eventually agreed to a field sobriety test, which he failed. Police asked if they could take a blood test of the pilot. The pilot refused. He was arrested and removed from the cockpit. Coming up, news about that disgusting, unconstitutional Fulton County jail. That when the record continues. Today, in a 4-to-1 vote, the Fulton County Board of Commissioners passed a $1.1 billion improvement plan for the Fulton County Jail. This comes after, in July of 2023, the Department of Justice opened an investigation into the jail and found the jail's conditions to be inhumane, violent, and unsanitary, which I've been saying for years. We've been reporting that here. Just look at the pictures on your screen to get an idea. But the billion-dollar plan includes significant renovations to the Fulton County Jail and a newly built special purpose facility that would be used for medical purposes and to support housing needs. Correspondent Carolyn Ryan joins me. Nice to see you, Carolyn. Do you know that this is the most disgusting jail I've ever seen? I've been in a lot of jails in my career. Do you have any idea what it was 4-to-1? What did the one vote against? Was it against didn't think enough money was being spent, or did that person think the jail was just fine?
Yeah, the biggest issue that critics have, and I think with this one vote, is that this is like putting a Band-Aid on it. They want to see a whole new jail. So under this proposal, Greta, what they're going to do is it's kind of twofold. They're going to renovate the current jail, and then they're going to build this new special purpose detention center, which is going to be specifically for inmates who have mental health issues and substance abuse issues. So they are getting a new facility, but it's not, they're still going to use the main primary jail. So this one person was saying, hey, I mean, is this just putting a Band-Aid on it, or do we need to just tear it down and do a whole new jail? So that's been the biggest divide. But this debate it's nothing new. They've been debating this for years, whether to build a new facility or to just renovate the one that they currently have. But while they've been debating, Greta, and pointing fingers at each other, inmates have been dying. I mean, the conditions in this jail are absolutely abhorrent, to the point to where you had mentioned the DOJ got involved in 2023 and launched a civil rights investigation. And they released a scathing report after this investigation, and they cited and confirmed what many had, been suspicious of for years. They confirmed that there's just the filthy conditions. They said it's extremely violent, that there's use of excessive force by staff. There's leaks, there's pest infestations, there's crumbling infrastructure. It goes on and on and on. So it's really been a black eye. And in fact, some people here in Georgia, they call it Georgia's Gitmo. That is so bad. So eventually they did have to enter, Greta, a consent decree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gitmo is not this disgusting. It just isn't.
True.
And Gitmo, in fact, even if you have a particular religion with a particular dietary needs, you can get it. This place is horrible. Right. And last October, they finally finished that report at the Department of Justice. Yeah. And I went up at a social event to the Attorney General of the United States, then Merrick Garland, and said, "What are you going to do? You know, it's a constitutional violation. This is your job." And what I also don't understand is the lawyers in Atlanta, because once that report came out, it was a walk to the bank to sue for civil rights violations, because it didn't, once you have a constitutional violation, it doesn't give the state or the city or the county, 6 months or 5 years to fix it. You have the violation right then and there, and they've done nothing. And that Fawny Willis district attorney, how in the world she and her assistants can stand there and ask for people to be incarcerated in that pending trial, I do not know, because the people in that jail are presumed innocent. They haven't been convicted of anything. It's just they don't have the money to make bail.
Yeah, and I mean, we all remember, I think most people, certainly your viewers would remember that one death that was so tragic in 2022. That gentleman was awaiting trial when he was found dead inside his jail cell, Greta, and he was covered in insects. And his family ended up suing the jail, saying that he had literally been eaten alive by bed bugs. He was in the mental ward of the jail for schizophrenia, and apparently the staff there knew he was in deteriorating health, and they didn't do anything to help him. He was malnourished and dehydrated and had just covered head to toe in bed bug bites. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, shame on the governor, the senators, and members of Congress, Fulton County, everybody. Because I can tell you that I've been in jails as I did say, I've been in jails every place. That jail, that facility down in Florida, they're complaining about detaining people pending deportation. That's nothing like this place. I'd so much rather be at that Alligator, Alcatraz, or whatever they call it, than this place.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, too, about the vote today, Greta, is that they knew they had to. They've been kicking the can down the road for so long. They knew they had to vote today because of a consent decree they entered with the DOJ saying you've got to clean up this jail ASAP. But the thing about it is, so it's $1 billion price tag, over $1 billion, but they're saying this might not be completed for 9 years. So you think about, there's still a lot of questions here. What's going to happen to all these inmates in the meantime?
And I should say that consent decree that they're acting on today, that was from January that you're talking about. We are now almost into September. So they're not exactly moving in haste. Carolyn Ryan, thank you.
You bet.
And the U.S.-Mexico border wall is getting a makeover. Here is Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
Now, if you look at the structure that's behind me, it's tall, which makes it very, very difficult to climb, almost impossible. It also goes deep into the ground, which would make it very difficult, if not impossible, to dig under. And today, we are also going to be painting it black. That is specifically at the request of the president, who understands that in the hot temperatures down here, when something is painted black, it gets even warmer, and it will make it even harder for people to climb.
The secretary was not messing around. Shortly after that announcement, Secretary Noem grabbed a paintbrush and she started painting the wall. Coming up, a state of emergency where it is, that will tell you when the record continues.
I want to tell you about some good news. There's more on the company front. Late Tuesday, Newsmax reported that the company saw its key broadcasting sector revenues grow by more than 28%, and the company saw overall revenue growth of 18%. And these are some big numbers indicating the company is still on a high growth trajectory. Earlier this year, the company did go public on the New York Stock Exchange, you may recall. Of course, we're glad we're living up to shareholder expectations. To get the full second quarter earnings report, just head on over right there, newsmaxinvest.com, and you can read the information and the SEC filings there. So definitely go on over and check us out.
Hurricane Erin is now a Category 2 hurricane, and she's building. Right now, a state of emergency has been declared in North Carolina. Residents and visitors along the Outer Banks in North Carolina are under evacuation orders. Correspondent Sarah Williamson is in Nags Head, North Carolina, with the very latest. Sarah?
Hey, Greta, good to be with you. That's right. I'm in the Outer Banks right now, but we are in the only part that's not an evacuation zone. That's why I'm able to be here. And although it doesn't look quite like a hurricane here in this part, you still have to have your wits about you because it is still very, very dangerous. Those red flags that you can see over my shoulder there, those double red flags, which means strictly do not go to the beach. That's the main important rule that all the emergency response teams have been saying to these people is just stay out of the water, especially. And that sand dune that you can see over my shoulder, that's been specifically made just within the last 24 hours to prepare for these strong waves that we may see here and to protect the houses and the residents from what may be to come. But I want to show you what the Outer Banks look like down south, because it is a lot more dangerous down there, particularly in areas like Buxton. You can see that these houses have been battling the waves all day, and now sections of Highway 12 in the area are being overtaken by water, whilst sand and debris are also covering parts of the roads in Hatteras as well. Now, Hurricane Erin's strength has remained steady over the past few hours. It is still a Category 2 hurricane with sustained winds of around 110 miles per hour. That is according to the latest update that we have received from the National Hurricane Center. But it is tracking to the north at around 14 miles per hour. That has picked up since earlier today, and the heavier rain and wind are about 50 miles away from the coast here in North Carolina as we speak. But ocean conditions are going to continue to deteriorate. That is what we have been seeing over the past 2 days since we have been here. Those waves have certainly been getting a lot more choppy and a lot higher, and especially now as the sun sets, that's when we're really going to start to see things change. The Department of Transportation, though, has been preparing for this, Greta. They have been building these sand dunes, just like the one you see over my shoulder, the entire way up Highway 12. That's a very slim road that takes you from the top of the Outer Banks all the way down to the south, and parts of that could be completely inaccessible over the coming days if they do flood significantly. They are saying that there should be over some parts, particularly down the south where I mentioned around Buxton and Hatteras, where they will see parts of those areas become completely inaccessible to the people who live there. That's why those areas have been evacuated. But it isn't just affecting North Carolina. There is going to be extremely dangerous rips all the way from Florida up to Massachusetts, as you can see by that red line there on the map. Those yellow areas on the ends there as well, they are also expecting to be quite choppy, but not quite as dangerous. Now, Erin is still expected to strengthen as well. She was a Category 3 yesterday, but then was reduced to a Category 2, and they are saying that as the hurricane does continue to move north, that it may get a little stronger. So all locals and anyone along this coast who might be affected, we are encouraging you to continue to check in with the National Hurricane Center for the latest updates and make sure that you always heed to their instructions there, Greta.
Sarah Williamson, thank you. And music group Coldplay is back in the news. On Monday, Coldplay was performing a show in Hull, England. During the show, one fan admitted to being at the Coldplay show last month in Massachusetts. You might remember that show due to this video that went viral and is on your screen. That is how former astronomer CEO Andy Byron and now former astronomer HR executive Kristen Cabot, they were embracing during the Coldplay concert last month. Fellow employees Byron and Cabot were married to other people, and now both Byron and Cabot have resigned from the company. So fast forward to Monday, Coldplay's lead singer Chris Martin said this to the fan who returned after the debacle last month.
We've been doing this a long time, and it's only recently that it became, But life throws you lemons, and you've got to make lemonade. So we're going to keep doing it because we want to meet some of you. I'd like to meet all of you, of course, but here we go. So if you turn towards the screens, now we're going to come looking for some wonderful people to say hello to. There we go, all right? Let's see who's out there to say hello to. Hola, who's this? All right, zoom in, please. Look at this sexy guy. All right. All right. Woo! Could you turn around and look? Wow, handsome. All right. Okay. Hello, my beautiful brother. Thank you for dressing that pink thing.
Coming up, a new job. I'm going to tell you who and what when the record continues. A Virginia Sheriff's Office has hired this recruiter to sniff out new employees. Meet Dean. In July, Dean joined the team at the Stafford County Sheriff's Office. In his first month on the job, he's attended community events, started promotions, and become a local social media favorite, maybe even an influencer. Dean has a special connection to the department. In 2022, he was rescued by the sheriffs from an abusive home. He was malnourished, and his organs were shutting down. One sergeant decided to foster Dean and help him recover. Now Dean is healthy and thriving in his new role. Roush Schmidt Tonight is up next. Have a great evening.
Desperate for attention, political windsock, Gavin Newsom starts running for president nearly 4 years before the next election. Let's check it out. Welcome to Rob Schmidt Tonight. You likely noticed Gavin Newsom is already full throttle running for president, a decision that he...
People think news just happens. It doesn't. It happens because there's someone there to capture the moment, to explain it and share it. That's my job. I go where news breaks and give you the facts. Join me for The Record on Newsmax.